Hey, Steve.
Hey, Jim.
So what's the most you'd ever pay for a record album?
Oh, man. Are you trying to get me divorced?
Well, let me rephrase that. What's the most you'd pay for a Peter Frampton Comes Alive album?
Oh, man. $50. That thing's awesome.
Welcome once again to our Two Guys Talking About Records podcast, a vinyl community podcast. I'm Jim Gleason from Radio Wasteland Records.
Steve Carlson, record collector extraordinaire.
Extraordinaire indeed. I guess I should add in there that I collect records too. I'm not just that kind of guy that pushes those out. So today, coming up though on the podcast, we're going to talk about something that could be a little bit difficult for me because I am a record store owner, but I'm also a record collector. But as a record store owner at heart, that means I kind of like capitalism.
Amen.
I thrive on that. You know,
Yes.
I need to do that to make a living.
Yep.
So we're going to talk about the cost of records, both used and new, coming up here in just a couple of minutes.
This will be exciting.
It should be. So before we do that, though, any exciting acquisitions in the past week to the personal collection?
You know, a couple of the newer albums I brought in, one I picked up here, Guided by Voices, put out La La Land. Their second album they've put out this year, which is kind of crazy. It was rock and it was prog. It's the first time I bought Guided by Voices in vinyl. And so I didn't know really what to expect of it. It was pretty good. Did it knock my socks off? No, they stayed on my feet, but I still enjoyed it. Then there was another one, a group called Blushing, and they put this album out last year, and it's more of the shoegaze, almost dream pop type music. Beautiful stuff. In fact, if I had bought that last year, it would have probably made my top 10 albums of 2022.
Oh, wow.
I really liked it a lot.
Oh, cool. I had a couple of exciting ones this past week also. Of course, Cake reissued Prolonging the Magic, first time ever on vinyl, so I was excited about that. And yes, I did keep a copy of that one as well. But I also picked up, and this is kind of cool, it's a various artists. You know how I am about my Michigan rock.
Yeah.
This is the Michigan Rocks album that came out in the late 70s. There are actually 3 variations of that album, and I had, for the longest time, had just the 2 of them. And it all revolves around the Bob Seger song, Heavy Music, Heavy Music and Ramblin' Gamblin' Man. So that may be a video thing down the line, but I finally picked up the 3rd variation of that, which is a Miss Press variation.
Okay.
So
Now that Cake album, though, it does not have short skirt and a long jacket.
no, that's on the yet to be, hopefully. Do you hear that, record labels and Cake? We want to hear Comfort Eagle.
That's right. Comfort Eagle. Come on.
And the Comfort Eagle song itself is absolutely great. But,
yes.
So hopefully, I never would have thought that Cake would begin reissuing on vinyl. They've always been very elusive. They've been a big part of the bootleg market as well with those. So last year, did they do Fashion Nugget? I'm trying to remember how long. So last year, they did Fashion Nugget. So that was great to see. And then they led to Prolonging the Magic. So let's keep our fingers crossed that the next one is forthcoming.
Comfort Eagle, come on.
I want to hear it.
Yep.
So onward to the question. I joked earlier about saying how much would you pay for a Peter Frampton album? And the reason I ask that is because on my days off sometimes I do what record collectors do, not record store owners, but I go around looking for records. And lately I've been hitting up antique mall booths and antique stores, and we could talk for probably about an hour and a half on just how painful that is to a record collector sometimes. Yeah. But the case in point, I did, and I won't name stores in this, but I went to an antique mall, within a 30 to 40 mile radius of us here in Midland, Michigan, and saw a copy, and it wasn't a great copy, of Peter Frampton Comes Alive for $18.
$1 record. And, I back in the early aughts, before they opened up all these record stores, but the only place you could find vinyl was going to an antique mall. Yep. And you would go in, and there would be a lot, but you would pick up all these great albums for $1, maybe $2 at most. But I've come out with stacks of them. And even when the record stores first began opening, the bargain bins were full of stuff. But now the antique malls that I visited too, it's nuts. What I'm seeing in prices, even classical music, they'll want a few bucks. It's a dime a dozen.
And again, I want to emphasize how tough this is for me to talk about, because as a business owner, a small business owner, I'm all for charging for whatever you can get for whatever you're selling. I mean, that is how small businesses work. You sell something for more money than you buy it for, whether it's new or used, or in this case, used vinyl. But at the same time, as a business owner, I do that too. I'm always looking for a good deal on vinyl so I can turn around and sell it to folks like you and make a couple of bucks on it. So again, I want to stress I'm all for that, but at the same time, I'm not an a-hole. So
Yeah.
I don't like to gouge people.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm 1 in a million on that, but it's tough to see, because I think overall, again, not to knock antique stores too much or malls, but it kind of gives, I think, leaves a bad taste in some folks' mouths when they come in and they say, oh, this record is worth this much money, and I just paid $20 for this one at an antique mall, and here I see it in your dollar bin.
Yeah, people get excited. I think that, hey, there's this resurgence. Well, this stuff all must be worth more. And so some are that way. Now, there's some very good. You'll go to some antique stores and the prices is reasonable. It's right. But even like Goodwill have been bumping up prices. I watch these videos and they're asking all this for that, because it's not about what it's worth. It's just, it's vinyl. Charge this.
And I think therein is the big difference. Most record stores you go to, legit record stores, are going to have folks that I would like to think are like me, that have some not only respect for the vinyl itself, but an understanding of demand and where things are. Great example I like to give is in the years previous, during the early part of, and again I'll use my air quotes, resurgence, any Van Halen album in decent shape, a used one, would fetch maybe $10. The early ones, maybe 15 or so. When Eddie Van Halen died, demand for them skyrocketed, as was evidenced in the Discogs want lists and demand there. And the average sale price of the Eddie Van Halen stuff, the Van Halen albums, early ones, first pressings, went from that $10 mark up into the mid-20s, 30s, and 40s in some cases.
Yeah. It almost makes you want, okay, who's going to die? And I'm going to go buy up everything that they have. So you make this list of, I know Ozzy can't last forever, though he may. Keith Richards, Lord
He'll
knows.
outlast us all.
You start buying it all up and go, yes. But it is, yeah. I mean, it is funny, how it never used to be that way, but it's changed so much with this collecting that now we are looking at that, and it's the music's the same, but we're just thinking, I think it's going to be a greater value. And in the long run, will it be? It may not, but up we jump right now, because some people are going to jump on it and try to get it.
When folks ask me about that, what's this particular album worth? What's this artist worth? The easy answer is, it's really worth, depending on the condition and the rarity and all this stuff. But the truth comes down to it. It's worth whatever someone's willing to pay for it.
Yes. There's some albums I have paid too much for, but it was such an important album to me. And it's like, I really want to have this. And you get tired of looking, and, you finally find it. I'm just getting it. No matter what, I want to have that, because it is worth to me, and someone else will look at it and go, why wouldn't the heck would you ever buy that?
It's like any other investment. If it's personal to you, if it's important to you, then it's worth it.
Yes. And music, I think you would agree, is there's a lot of passion, because it's about memories. It's about, that's an album that when you play it, you just think back to the past and say, man, this was a fun time. This is really great, like a verve pipe.
Yeah, well, we talked about that the other day.
Yes.
That's important to us as well.
Yes.
Now, the antique stores, I keep saying, I don't mean to harp on antique stores, but apparently I am, and I do mean to do it. If they sell that record, like we'll go back to the Frampton example, if they sell that for $19 to someone who comes in, who on the periphery hears, vinyl records are making a comeback, then that's going to be, we sold that one for $19. Why can't we ask this? I saw a Journey album that normally, in the condition this was in, it was a little stinky too in this store, for $40. One that I would normally sell in here in that condition for $5 to $10.
Yeah, it's buyer beware.
Yeah.
You really, if you don't know, and I would gather most people listening to this know what they're looking for, but you have to be careful. But how many new people come in? I'm just getting into vinyl. You hear that every week. And so they're going to go out and see that and think, yes, I want this. And you're right. Then they'll just think, hey, I'm selling this for that. What else can I get?
We had a pair of new customers come into the store about a week ago. And the best way I could describe it is that they were suffering from some sort of antique vinyl mall PTSD. They kept picking up records that I had for $2. Is this really $2? Is this really only $3 or is this really only $5? I'm like, yeah, well, what's wrong with it? Nothing. It's Linda Ronstadt. It's a $2 record.
Yes.
Well, and they couldn't quite wrap their heads around the fact that in this store, and I think a lot of other stores, that's going to be a $2 to $3 record.
Yeah.
Because they're used to seeing it at antique malls. And I think they did admit to me that they had been shopping at another antique mall and seeing stuff of that nature. So it's a cool surprise, and they discover us, and I'm happy to be there to them, but there's no way I could charge $10 for something like that unless it's absolutely super special.
Well, yeah, because your experienced collector would come in and just go, God, don't go there. I mean, they're asking this much for they want that much. It's like suicide. Your prices have to be right. And I've been to a few, I felt charged good prices, and I would go back and I would buy from them. But those booths were run by experienced collectors that kind of had an idea of what was going on. It's when they don't have that and just, it's like Beanie Babies all over again. Well, that Beanie Baby I know is worth $100, which now you can get for $3.
Yes. Well, and that's those old Reader's Digest box sets. Well, there's 10 records in there, so it's got to be worth $10 a record.
Yes.
It's like, no, I've got enough of them. I use them as doorstops in the summertime here. So, last one on the antique stores. I can tell you as well that I know of at least one antique store owner, again in a 30 to 40 mile radius, that comes here to our store and raids the dollar bins every 2 to 3 months.
Wow.
So I don't ask where they're going, but they told me that they run an antique mall and an antique store. I'm like, well, more power to you.
Yep. Cleans up your inventory, and someone else will think they got a great deal.
I got plenty more to go.
Well,
so,
$1 from you, they can go $2 there to double their investment.
or even 10, for God's
Yes.
sake. Now, back to the, what's the most you'd pay for a record? And I don't want to get too personal here because I'm about to, my wife is kind of standing here working on some stuff listening to this. But what's the most that you would ever, or have you ever comfortably paid for an album?
I've paid up to $500 for an album.
And you blink a little bit and then you have a little buyer's remorse, or is it a good feeling because you got that one?
It used to be more of buyer's remorse, but I've gotten to a point now where there's just certain albums that are important. And I know what it's worth. And even at that price, I got a good deal on it. And so it was worth bringing back into my collection. And there's just, when you see something really rare, if you don't buy it, I think you can get a bigger buyer's remorse because the rest, your life, you're just going to sit there and think, I should have bought that. There was a Big Star Radio City. I saw that once. I had to decide there was a Miles Davis CD box set or this Big Star. Well, I went with the Miles Davis CD box set because I've always wanted that. But now, 4 years later, I still think about that Big Star, and I just should have. I just said, no, I'm going to get both. I'm going to get both because I did really, really want that Miles Davis. I would have had a better deal by now on that, but it was such an important album.
Well, can I ask what the tag was on that?
I think at the time they wanted $200.
Okay. And now it's probably skyrocketed well up there.
Yes.
One of the biggest that I've ever, and I'm going to use the word acquired because I didn't buy it outright, there was some trading involved, was that first pressing MacArthur. I know you've seen that.
Yes.
I've got that. That thing, even on Discogs now, I think there's one for sale overseas that's topping out around $1,800 on that. Wow. But there was one, not local, but nearby, and it had been there for a while, and I knew the guy that was selling it, so we struck up a conversation. And I worked out a trade with a very large item here that was in the the triple-digit range that involves a 5 at the front end of it, and then some cash money along with it to get this. Now, it's a good album. It's not my favorite album, but it is an important one for me to have because I really like having the Michigan collectibles.
Yeah, and it's something when you look at it, it just makes you smile. And some people don't need that. You know what? They are happy with the $1, $2 records. It brings them joy. It's part of the collection. I'm only going to flea markets. I'm going to garage sales, and that's how I like to collect. And that's good. I think as we get older, we start to develop more when you decide, well, what kind of collection do you really want? And what are you going after? And now it's to find these special, especially a punk rock album that's just rare. It's like, wow, I got it finally.
That brings to mind that Minutemen album. How often do you find that it's double nickels?
Yeah, double nickels.
Double nickels, and we got one here in years ago at the store, and you and I talked about it, and I thought, well, I kind of want to keep this one, Steve. I'm sorry, and you were okay with that.
Yep.
And that's a triple-digit record also. And then lo and behold, another one shows up a year or two later. So that's another good investment to have because those just climb up.
Yes, they keep climbing up. And it's one that I put up right out front so I can look at it every single day.
Now, the idea of paying several $100s for an album could be tough for some folks to swallow. It's one record. It's highly collectible for whatever reason. It's important to you. It's rare. Whatever the case, I could pay $500, $600 for this. It's another story, though, when you start talking about box sets, especially newer ones, but even some older box sets, like some of the older Zeppelin or Floyd box sets are worth a lot of money. But new box sets in particular are ranging, I find now, from that couple $100 mark all the way up to the $500 to $600 mark, depending upon what they are. Where do you stand on paying that kind of money for these newer reissues, but everything that encompasses a collection that goes with them?
I'm having a more difficult time. I used to have hundreds of box sets, and most of them were CD box sets, but they were vinyl, and I loved them because there's so much of this extra. What I find is the box sets I have, they look great. How often do I actually pull it down to play it? And I don't. I reach to my other albums. I see these box sets, in some cases, it's almost like a way to let's get some money from people because we know it's a legacy project. So we know this music's been paid for. So they're going to have a higher profit margin on it. And some of the stuff that they add in, how important is it? Are you really going to listen to it a lot? I mean, they're cool. Some of those Paul McCartney ones go for over $1,000 that'll come out. George Harrison had a box crate, for God's sakes.
That was made, I remember that one. It was about a year or so ago, made out of wood from his private estate.
Yes.
So, I mean, that's cool, but
it
was
is.
also a couple thousand.
Yeah, and if you're a collector and you can afford it, it is something, it's there, you're looking at it, and it does make you feel good, and no problem with that. I just find that anymore in my life, if I can get that original vinyl, that brings me greater joy than some box sets. Now, I just recently purchased a Luna box set I used to have. That was an important box set to me. I wanted it. I found it. I got it back in. But generally speaking, I'm not buying what I used to on box sets. There's that Velvet Underground one. I'm still kind of, do I really need it? And there it is. I can take my money and put it into this, or do I buy more regular records?
With the newer box sets they're coming out with, I think that the record labels and the artists, or the artists' estates, are doing what they can to make these more attractive to people by adding in all these extras that you mentioned. Last week we talked about the 50th anniversary of the Dark Side of the Moon, and we touched upon that live at Wembley. And I think we briefly mentioned that huge 50th anniversary box set that is releasing here in a couple of weeks, looks like March 24th, of Dark Side of the Moon. I did a video on this on our YouTube channel as well, but the end result is this type of release I don't see as being tremendously attractive to anyone other than the most hardcore of Pink Floyd fans, because it doesn't really contain anything other than Dark Side of the Moon.
Yeah. You get some of these box sets, they'll say, and we found a previously unreleased track. Now, you're going to pay for all this other stuff, but there's one track. a hardcore person really, really wants to have that. But it's a niche market, but it's a profitable niche market for them. So you don't have to make as much. And then for a collector, prices may skyrocket on it, at least right now.
But from a listening standpoint, let's pick on Dark Side of the Moon. This one again. I'm very, very excited about the Wembley live concert being included in on that. And I'm even more excited that you can buy it separately for a lot cheaper. But this Pink Floyd box set is going to be going for $321 suggested list price. And in addition to the remix version of the album, the only vinyl you're getting in there is the single LP of Dark Side of the Moon, the remastered version, and then the double LP live at Wembley. All the rest of it, you've got a CD. There's 2 different CD versions. There's a Blu-ray audio version, actually 2 different Blu-ray audio, a DVD audio, red laser, and then a couple of replica 12-inch or 7-inch singles. So you're getting, like, for example, the Blu-ray, I'm looking at this, you get the 5.1 surround sound mix, the stereo mix uncompressed, the 5.1 surround mix uncompressed, and then the stereo mix with the DTS on there. So that is something, I think, for a true audiophile. Now, it does include a 76-page music book, the song book of the album, and a 160-page hardcover book. So for a collector, that's very cool. But for the music lover, you're really not getting much, in my opinion, on this.
You would think you would need to have a very expensive system. Obviously, if you can afford it, you probably will have one. But yeah, for me, it would mean nothing to have all that other stuff. I have no reason for it. Books are cool. The packaging and the extras is fun in a box set, but it really comes down to, do I need to have it? And, well, then again, I spent $500 for a African record, so I guess I felt I needed to have that.
If we compare that to, let's say, for example, the Beatles Revolver Special Edition that came out last October. That was a 4 LP box set, and it included some of those sessions. Now, again, this is a group that is very, very important, not only to a lot of people, but to music in general. I'm not saying that Pink Floyd isn't. They are. We talked about that last week. But I think the Beatles estates, the Beatles label, did this right by including, the original mixes and then some 2022 remixes and then takes. Because if you watch that, for example, that Beatles documentary, you get to view the process that they went through. And it was an amazing thing to watch. It just took, 20 hours of your life, but it was still amazing to watch. And you get that on the audio side on a release that includes a lot of those, the steps they go through to create the masterpiece.
And that appeals especially for that Beatles collector, because how cool is that when you can hear them building that and what they're doing. And demos are a big part of it when you hear it. I'll go back to that Velvet Underground when I'm listening for their very first album. They have the demos in there. Here's how it began to progress. And for a huge collector, it is fun to hear this progression until they finally get to that final. It's exciting. It's historic. It's history that you're listening to, and you can, there it is in your home room.
All right, let me throw this one out at you. On that note, this was released with very little fanfare, I believe, back the end of February 23rd. And this is a 6 LP box set from the band Aha. Now, your first reaction is, okay, do they have 6 albums? Yeah. But no, Steve, it's not a career respective 6 LP box set. It is a 6 LP box set revolving only around their one big album, Hunting High and Low. And on that album was one song that actually made it. These guys are the definition of a one-hit wonder.
Yeah.
So list price on this came in at around $130. But I get thinking about what's wrong with, and you mentioned earlier there, how much money can we milk out of fans on stuff like this? This, I think, is a prime example. You have here, and I don't want to have a hardcore Aha fan out there shaking their fists at the speakers saying, you don't know what you're talking about with these guys. But at the heart, they're a good band that had one great song.
Yeah. Can
you get a 6 LP retrospective box set out of one album from this?
I would be falling asleep. I like that one great song, but for God's sake, 6 albums of nothing like new stuff happening. Wow, that is just, well, hey, look at what we found. Well, let's just make a box set of all that, all right?
Let me read through our listing here. LP1 is the album, Hunting High and Low. LPs 2 and 3 are the demos of Hunting High and Low that were recorded between 1982 and 1984. LP4 and LP5 are singles, extended versions, and B-sides. LP6 is the early mixes of the album. So that's a total of 60 tracks across 6 140-gram black vinyl LPs into an outer box slipcase, and there may or may not be a book or something involved in it as well. A 64-page booklet with sleeve notes and photography.
Not even colored vinyl.
No.
And you don't get a copy of the video on DVD, which really made that song. That's what created that song, their MTV video.
They could have put a DVD and a Blu-ray in
there.
They
should have, yes.
So, safe to say, though, I mean, after February, I'm showing that this is still available from our distributors, so I don't see that as being a huge seller. So.
But for those of you that haven't bought this, didn't know about it, it is available. Rush to get it, because this could take off, and you're going to be on the ground floor of something great.
You know, I haven't looked at Discogs to see what that's going for on the aftermarket, but I can imagine it would be somewhere around in there. But again, we could go on and on and on about how the recording industry, in some cases, and maybe in my opinion, is shooting themselves in the foot by doing things like this. Because, yes, you want that content out there, but how much of it is necessary, and how much resources are you tying up from bands that are trying to get their vinyl pressed in a timely fashion?
100% right on that, because they are these legacy and these reissues of, great groups, but you can find the stuff out there. But you're right, a new band has a hard time. I have a friend, Michael Christensen. He's getting ready to release another album, and they told him it won't be till May before we even get it pressed. Now he just received the test pressing, so the plants are catching up, which he was blown away. He couldn't believe it, that it was almost there. But generally speaking, they'll go 3-6 months down the line, even longer.
That's much better than a year or two ago. Our friend Brett Mitchell released his album 2 years ago now, I think, about a year and a half ago. And being friends with him, we got to kind of be in on the process a little bit, hearing from Brett and his manager Jan about what they were going through with the delays after delays after delays, trying to get that record released. So it's picking up, and that's a lot better. But you get stuff like this happening, saying, okay, and I don't see them pressing tens of thousands of that. Yeah. It doesn't tell me what the run was for the Aha record, but I can't imagine it being more than a few thousand.
Agree. I hope it's numbered. Then it'll be even more.
It doesn't appear to be.
So. Oh man. Couldn't even number it.
Now, one of the box sets I think you talked about passing up was that Rolling Stones in mono box set. And one of our customers did pick it up. They absolutely love it. And they said it's just a great addition to their Rolling Stones collection. But again, that's something for a real hardcore fan to bring in. It
is. A lot of people were excited about that. There were so many on YouTube unboxing videos of it. I had all the albums already, and so I just looked at, do I want to put my money into that or chase down certain other albums? And for me, it was much more, it was worthwhile. I mean, I picked up this Alice in Chains albums here, Jars of Clay and Jars of Flies. That was important. So I look at something like that over that box set, much would rather have this, classic from the 90s.
If you look at it from your wallet, that Rolling Stones listed for about $450. You can buy a lot of records, other records with that too. But again, it's not that box set.
Yeah, and I think some folks look at these mono, when you looked at the first Rolling Stones mono that came out, the Beatles mono that came out, the prices went through the roof. And I do feel there are some that just look at the collectability of this, more so than even the music, and hoping that, man, that thing's going to jump. It may not. Depends on how many they put out.
Maybe we should start some sort of Wall Street investment portfolio that deals in nothing but collectible vinyl.
Yes.
Sell the Aha.
What turns that into the Kramer, the Kramer of vinyl? Get some sound effects here and sell now.
Well, this has been fun as always. I think we're coming up on our time. And Steve, this is always great to talk with you about this kind of stuff. If you're out there and you've got a subject or an album that you'd like two guys to talk about records about,
Yes,
let
like
us know.
aha.
Yeah, let's hear from you aha fans and how wrong we were about digging on them. I don't want to go down that road because I know there's some people that like
Yes,
it. I don't
there
want to
are.
knock people that like that stuff,
Yep.
but that's all well and good. So I got to go out and try and sell some records to people now at an overinflated price.
Perfect. I know they're lining up just for that.
Steve, thanks again. We will talk to you next week.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Have a good one.